After my mother's death, leaving me debts instead of inheritance, I changed 4 jobs and 5 apartments. Every time landlords found out about my payment issues, doors slammed shut in my face. The dormitory on the outskirts of the city became the last option. Cheap, dirty, but with a metal door that could be locked with 3 turns of a key. When the realtor showed me the room, I turned a blind eye to the cockroaches and the smell of mold. I was concerned about only one thing. Is there a lock on the door? The answer was positive. I didn't bother explaining that in 3 years of wandering, I had learned to value not comfort, but the ability to lock myself away from the world. The house I lived in was an old pre-war 2-story building, dilapidated with creaking floors, battered walls, a shared kitchen, toilet, and shower. Cockroaches covering the walls were also our shared problem. Frankly, it didn't particularly bother anyone in this house, at least not on my floor. Nearby lived elderly men and women who were spending their final days, and cockroaches were probably the last thing they cared about. Only at the end of the corridor, next to the communal kitchen, lived a young couple, students. They rented a room, it seemed. Friends often visited them. There was usually noise until morning, with splattered floors in the corridor and insects eating that disgusting substance. It was a common occurrence. The only thing that saved me from all this filth was a good metal door and double-sided tape that I stuck along the edges. Cockroaches didn't get into my apartment. This is sort of an introduction so you understand where and how everything happened. And yes, the story itself isn't about cockroaches or the horrors of life in the dormitory. It's about something else, about other horrors that began. About a week ago, late in the evening, I returned home from work. The corridor was already accustomed to its usual atmosphere. Elderly women in housecoats gossiped in the kitchen, filling it with cigarette smoke, which at least masked the constant stench from drunks. "Good evening," I greeted and quickly went into my room, turning the key in the lock 3 times. I immediately turned on the electric kettle. It was warm and cozy at home. I didn't want to go outside, but I had to, since there was no shower in the room. When I finished everything, I finally drank some hot tea, lay down in bed, and my tired eyes closed right away. I woke up several times during the night. Generally, it's not a rare occurrence for me. My sleep is quite light, and I can wake up from the slightest rustle, no matter how tired I am. But people were making noise, sometimes bumping right outside my room, sometimes breaking into the door. There were many reasons, but that night it was something different. From below, under me, a sound came, so distinct as if someone was dragging something heavy across the floor, a wardrobe or some kind of cabinet. With sleepy eyes, I looked at the clock. It was the beginning of the 2nd hour of the night. "Are they out of their minds?" I muttered, throwing on a robe, heading to the bathroom. By the way, it was located there, where the shower was, at the end of the corridor. I didn't know my neighbors and didn't have any desire to meet them. I saw no point in listening to constant old age problems or gossip. I roughly understood who was who on our floor, but below me, I had no idea who lived there. That sound downstairs continued for a long time. Moving, moving. I kept hoping they would stop. Finally, it was deep into the night. Damn, are they rearranging furniture? People need to get up early for work tomorrow. In short, I endured. I had no intention of going to sort things out. Such is my character. I endure, but sometimes my patience snaps, and then hide if you can. That night, the only thing I did was knock on the radiator. Essentially, we all share one. The noisy neighbors didn't ignore it. After maybe a couple of minutes, the scraping downstairs, thankfully, stopped, and I, seizing the moment, fell asleep. I didn't wake up again that night. Maybe they continued making noise. In any case, I heard nothing. The next morning was pretty standard. Coffee, cigarette, bag on shoulder, and off to the bus. It was freezing outside, unbearable cold. Luckily, the bus stop wasn't far from home. I was in such a hurry to catch the bus that I only remembered on the bus stop how an old man peeked out from one of the rooms on the first floor. Slightly opening the door, he stood there when I was descending the stairs. We made eye contact, and it seemed to me as if he was waiting for me. I don't know. Apparently, that's where the scraping came from. That night, when I returned home late in the evening, out of curiosity, I walked along the corridor of the first floor and noticed the door, an old wooden panel, and under it crawled cockroaches. Disgusting. That night, around the same time, I woke up again from a terrible scraping sound. This time, it was apparently louder. Again, this damn old man is dragging something. God, this lousy pension. How much more can this go on? Rubbing my eyes and picking up a slipper from the floor, I muttered and started hitting the radiator with all my might. The scraping quieted down, but didn't stop. I continued pounding on the radiator so the old man would finally calm down. It took another 5 minutes or so. Finally, when the noise stopped, I turned over to the other side and fell asleep. Yes, except that damn old man woke me up again, and judging by the numbers on the clock, I hadn't slept for very long. This time the scraping was replaced by moaning, as if I had landed in an old folks' home where everyone has something hurting or just gone mad. Getting out of the warm bed, getting dressed, and going down to the first floor was neither within my strength nor my desire. So I had to repeat the procedure with the slipper and the radiator. But this time, it didn't help. Eventually, I had to get up and go sort things out. Honestly though, I thought that in that room lived some mentally challenged old man, and whether you reason with him or not, it makes no difference. But still, throwing on a jacket and pants, half asleep and angry, I went down to the first floor. There was no doorbell on that door. I had to knock. First, politely, lightly, barely touching the nasty door. But when I didn't hear even footsteps behind it, I started banging seriously. When I finally heard shuffling steps somewhere deep in the room, followed by the turn of the key in the lock, the door creaked, and the old man peeked through a small crack. He stood there, looking at me, silently saying nothing. "Respected sir, of course. I understand that maybe there's some renovation going on. I don't know, but do you see what time it is? Could you please stop making noise? It's night. People need to get up for work. Are you moving furniture there? Groaning? It's all audible." He stands there, looking intently right into my eyes, moving his lips as if wanting to say something, and then, very quietly said to me, "Don't bang on the radiator." "Why are you banging?" "Old man, are you mocking me?" I raised my voice, already brazen. "What do you mean, don't bang? You're doing God knows what here at night, I promise you. Next time, I'll call the police." In response to my words, the old man just slammed the door shut right in front of my face. I went back upstairs, seemingly quiet. I got into bed. I don't feel like sleeping anymore. That old fart woke me up. Work in 4 hours. Gotta get up. What to do? I took out my phone and lay there, browsing the vastness of the internet, hoping to fall asleep. The moans from the floor below started at the time when I began to drift off. Monotonous, heavy moans. But luckily, this time, they couldn't wake me up, and despite those damn sounds, I managed to fall asleep. The next day after work, I decided to ask the neighbors, let's say, down the hall. "Hello? Who lives in room 17? Is that on the first floor?" "What?" replied the drunken voice of one of the neighbors. "Yes, on the first floor." Confirmed I. They exchanged puzzled glances with each other. "Well, I don't know. Maybe someone arrived there again? As far as living there, no one's been there for about 3 years, probably. What's wrong?" "Yeah, Lord, I can't sleep properly. It's right below me, the room. Sometimes it moans, sometimes it moves something across the floor in the middle of the night. I've already gone to deal with it. There's some old man. He opened the door, peeked out with one eye, and didn't say anything. I don't know about that. Some kind of witchcraft. The thing is, there really used to live an old man. He was already very old. He lived there until he died. I don't know exactly when, because I don't know. I only remember that there was a terrible stench, and it took a long time to find the source. And when they found it, his bloated corpse was already lying there. Maybe that's who you saw." Her drinking buddies laughed. "I see. Sinister stuff," I thought to myself, turned around and went to my room. Who am I listening to? Have I completely lost my mind? Standing there are 3 drunk women with puffy faces as if bees had stung them, and I'm complaining to them about my life. Yeah, I've hit rock bottom. But still, after this conversation, a strange unease settled inside me. Every day, either going down or coming up the stairs, I'd throw a glance at that door of the supposedly empty room, according to the neighbor. And the moans and creaks continued every night, and every night I knocked on the radiator so the old man would calm down. Soon, events began that still don't make sense in my head. Yes, it seems everything started after I called the police one sleepless night. The knocks on the radiator didn't help that time. Actually, knocking on the door didn't help either. No one answered me. I had to call the police. They arrived quickly. Apparently, they were having coffee somewhere nearby. 2 burly guys entered the building and asked what happened. Well, I outlined the whole situation to them, and together we approached the ill-fated door. They knocked. Silence. In response, "Open up, police." No answer came, as if there really was no one behind the door. The policeman politely explained to me that they wouldn't break into the room. After all, nighttime noise is far from a reason for that. In short, they turned around and left. I went outside to breathe some fresh air, and suddenly, to my right, a light came on in the window. I looked there. An old man was standing on the first floor. Everything was clearly visible. A dim bulb slightly illuminated the room, and he was standing by the wall. Aha, so that's how you do it, I thought, and quickly went back into the entrance. Apparently, he saw the arriving car with flashing lights and quickly pretended that no one was home. I went to him. "Come on, bang on the door. Open up. Are you putting on a comedy?" This time, I apparently got to him, and soon the door opened, just like the last time. Only part of his face showed through a small crack, and the crazy old man started chattering. "Why are you bothering me all the time? Why are you knocking on the radiators? Your last hour has come. Don't bother him. Don't bother him." With each word, his voice grew louder and soon turned into a scream that made me shiver and retreat back to the stairs. The door gradually began to open. I was already standing by the stairs when a hand appeared from the doorway. The dim hallway light was enough to examine it. A dirty limb with long peeling nails trying to feel something on the wall. At that moment, I ran up the stairs. It wasn't until I reached our hallway that things eased a bit. There were people there, unlike on the first floor. It was then that I asked myself, could it be that all the residents of the first floor are fine with such a neighbor? Why does no one complain about him, try to reach out? Although I don't even remember the last time I saw people on the first floor, I found answers to all these questions quite soon. The next morning, the very alcoholic woman who told me that no one lived in the apartment knocked on my door. She herself became my alarm clock. She wanted to ask for money, short on vodka, and yet, after the previous night's events, I viewed her stories from a different angle. I gave her money and started asking her detailed questions, who, what, and so forth. She said that everything she knew, she had already told me then in the kitchen. She only mentioned that if there is someone there, it's better not to bother him. Yeah, very witty. How am I supposed to sleep if he's sitting there, crazy and moaning throughout the room? But how can anyone live there if, according to her, the room is empty and the old man who lived there died long ago? Or maybe not. Stop. I don't understand anything. The woman went, apparently happy, to the store, but I stopped her. Tell me, is that old man definitely dead? It's only now starting to dawn on me that something devilish is indeed happening in this house. There were no doubts left when, in the middle of the night, someone knocked on my door. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but the knock was quite insistent, and when I opened my eyes, it didn't disappear. I went to the door, looked through the peephole. No one was there. Strange. Apparently, I was dreaming after all, but as soon as I moved away from the door, the knock repeated. What the hell is going on? I shouted, and quickly turned the key in the lock and opened the door. I looked out first in one direction. No one further down the corridor. The light bulb was just flickering, and that was it. On the other side, it had burned out entirely. Apparently, half of the entire corridor was in darkness. Only the kitchen light was on. I look into the darkness. 1 second, 2, 3. I look and realize that right outside my door, someone is there. Someone is standing and breathing heavily. Suddenly, a silhouette begins to emerge from the darkness, and I feel someone approaching me, right up close. A switch flipped in my head, and I tried to run back inside and close the door, but someone was holding it from the other side, so strongly that I couldn't budge it. At the same moment, a stench hit my nose, so bad that my head started spinning. I ran into the room, clicked on the light. Nothing happened. I grabbed the phone from the bed, and in those seconds, it was already unnecessary to see how someone was stepping over the threshold of my dwelling, staggering, leaning against the wall. The unwelcome guest was approaching me. I swear to God, that's when I heard those familiar moans. They were coming from the lower floor. It was that deceased old man. I only turned away for a second to grab the phone, turn on the flashlight, and he had already moved right up to me, though I was standing at the other end of the room. How did he cover those few meters so quickly without me hearing his steps? That's when I saw him in all his glory, if only for a split second. Pale, bloated old man, stinking, surrounded by a swarm of flies. But it wasn't the flies that caught my attention. It was his stomach. It was torn open, almost spilling out brown, completely rotten organs. He grabbed my head with his filthy, dirty hands. I tried to resist, tried to break free from his firm grip, hitting him wherever I could, but it was no use. He pulled me to the radiator, which I had constantly been knocking on, and firmly gripping my head, began smashing it against the iron pipe. Terrible pain in the forehead area. First blow. Second, I already felt blood flowing down my face. Then the third, fourth, and I lost consciousness. Honestly, I thought he would smash my head into pulp. I don't know how I survived. I don't know. I only came to when neighbors walked into my open room and, seeing me in a pool of blood, called an ambulance. After that, I remember vaguely. In the hospital, lying in a nice ward. Policemen came several times, asking what happened that night, but I couldn't explain anything coherently. They waited for me to recover. Doctors were all amazed at how I survived with such injuries. Usually, people don't make it, one of the young nurses told me while changing my bandages. If you think this is where it ended and they lived happily ever after, I must disappoint you. In the hospital, I also heard those moans. No, it wasn't a dream or a hallucination. I truly heard those sounds. And when I opened my eyes, he was standing in the corner of the ward, in which, by the way, I was alone, mockingly tapping on the radiator, as if reminding me who he was and why all this was happening. Thanks to a stroke of luck, the nurse walked in at that moment, and when she turned on the light, he vanished. They placed some man who had been in an accident in the bed next to mine. Probably thanks to him, the old man never appeared in the ward again. When I was finally discharged, I returned to the dorm, packed all my belongings, and moved to another place, rented an apartment elsewhere. It was old, sure, but at least without such surprises. Now I was afraid of every rustle. Even in the new apartment, I slept with the light on and was afraid to see him again, hear those damned moans. But thank God, everything was calm. He didn't bother me, at least for now. But here's what I found out when I returned to the dorm about a week later to pick up some things I hadn't managed to take the first time. I overheard a conversation between neighbors in the communal kitchen. As it turned out, the first floor of our dorm was not particularly populated. Almost all the rooms were vacant. Only 3 were inhabited. Who they were, I don't know, but rumors had it that these people were found in that very room. They were found because the stench filled the entire floor.